Chapter 666 Dimensional Shroud. As the light finally faded, the small figure before Michael settled into stillness. The glow vanished completely, leaving behind a quiet calm. Wisdom's new form was different from before. Its feathers were a deep silver gray. One thing that stood out was its eyes, bright green, just like Michael's other blood servants and rank 3 undead. Michael studied the creature for a moment, noting how the air around it twisted faintly. There was no visible aura, yet something unseen moved in its presence. Threads of invisible energy coiled around it like drifting mist, reacting faintly to its every motion. Curious, Michael activated the Eye of Truth. His gaze deepened, piercing through the layers that made up Wisdom's being. Information poured into his mind. Physically weak, Michael muttered, brows furrowing. Very weak. This was the first thing he noticed. Wisdom was a level 30 creature now, yet its physical strength looked like it had only tripled from its pre-merge phase. Despite its fragility, the energy around it was overwhelming. It constantly folded and shifted, creating faint ripples that made the air itself seem alive. Michael could see the invisible lines of space warping with every small movement the creature made. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. The more he looked, the more complex it became. Wanting to test the creature's responsiveness, Michael extended his hand. "Come here," he said softly. The void feather tilted its head. It gave a low hoot before spreading its wings. It moved, and before Michael could even process it, the creature was already perched on his shoulder. Michael was stunned. Even with his perception, he hadn't seen the transition. He reached up slowly, his fingertips brushing against its cool feathers. "Was that teleportation?" he asked aloud. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't. "Move again," Michael commanded. The void feather gave a soft hoot and leapt off his shoulder. For a heartbeat, it vanished from sight. Then a blur, a flicker, gone again. It reappeared behind him, hovering silently, then darted to his left, right, and above, all within a second. Michael's eyes strained to follow, but even his perception couldn't fully track it. All he caught were faint distortions in the air. He let out a slow breath. Incredible! Even if a rank 3 awakener saw this, they wouldn't stand a chance. They would see nothing but flickers, perhaps not even that. For a being as strong as he was within that rank, he could barely follow. The average one would be utterly blind. "You're starting to remind me of someone." His mind drifted briefly to another of his creations, Ghost, his first named ant-undead. Michael had always suspected that Ghost was part of an irregular species. Its strength didn't really make sense, as even now, at a lower level than beginning, the Titan couldn't beat it in raw power. Now, as he looked at Wisdom, he felt that same faint aura of something unordinary. Could you be like Ghost? Michael wondered aloud, tilting his head as his gaze deepened. He narrowed his eyes, the Eye of Truth intensifying as he tried to dig deeper into Wisdom's structure. Yet even as he pushed his perception further, no new information revealed itself. The invisible lattice of energy surrounding Wisdom was too intricate to be fully grasped. Every time Michael thought he understood its flow, it changed, like a puzzle that reassembled itself the moment one found a piece. After several attempts, he finally let the eye fade. Shifting his attention, Michael opened the hovering panels again, focusing on the details of Wisdom's new abilities. His gaze paused at phase shift. Before, the ability had been limited barely a 5-meter range. Now, the numbers had changed drastically. Phase shift, perfect mastery. Range 100 meters. Duration 10 seconds. Effect allows entry into the first layer of the void. Michael's brow rose slightly. 100 meters. And it can access the first layer of the void now. His mind immediately began tracing what he knew about that place. There were several layers in the void, and only those who had grasped laws could begin to access them with their body. With his current knowledge, Michael knew of 3 layers. The first layer was a thin line between the material world and the void itself. Beings that entered this level had not truly left reality. They existed between the folds of space. Actions performed here could still affect the material world because the connection wasn't severed. It was a halfway point, a veil rather than a realm. Wisdom being able to move within that layer freely was already beyond impressive. The second layer, often called the true front of the void, was a different story. Those who entered it had completely left material space behind. Nothing from the physical world could reach them unless it carried spatial authority or a law mark. Only experts who had begun to weave law into their essence could survive there. It was a place where distance could loop endlessly. And then there was the third layer, the one Michael had once thought was simply space. In truth, it was the threshold of the universe itself, where the endless darkness and drifting matter between worlds began. To exist there meant to walk the boundary of the cosmos. Michael glanced at Wisdom, who preened its silver feathers lazily. You can enter the first layer freely now, meaning you're standing at the edge of what only law users can touch. He then thought of something else. If you continue down this path, does this mean when you advance to rank 3 you'll get a space law? The thought sent a thrill through him. It wasn't just an evolution. It was a step toward understanding a domain most supernatural beings only dreamed of. Michael's lips curved faintly. Looks like I'll have to start looking for more materials for you. But first, let me check out your new skills. Though phase shift was useful, it came with a small annoyance. Michael had copied it from Wisdom long ago, so his phase shift still sat at basic mastery. To match Wisdom's perfect mastery, he would need to copy the skill again. A better workaround flickered through his mind, but that could wait. For now, it was time to check his new skills. New skills acquired. 1. Dimensional Shroud. Basic temporarily cloaks the user in warped space, rendering them invisible to physical and spiritual perception for a short duration. 2. Fold Blink. Intermediate. Instantly shifts the user through folded space. 3. Singularity Pulse. Intermediate condenses unstable spatial energy into a single point before releasing it outward. Michael tapped the owl's beak lightly. Activate the Dimensional Shroud. Wisdom's green eyes seemed confused at first, but after a moment, he seemed to understand. The air around him tightened, as if an unseen skin drew inward. Then the bird was gone. Michael opened the Eye of Truth. Threads of perception dove in, and still he found only hollow distortions. Whether this was the limit of the Eye of Truth or his mastery of it, Michael didn't know, but if the eye could only see this much, the skill's effect was indeed genuine. Move, he ordered. The hollow slid 3 paces to the left without stirring a grain of dust. Several undead raised their heads in unison, eyes unfocused. Then, settled again. Closer. The hollow obeyed. It reached his front and hung there for 6 breaths, then eased to his right shoulder. A whisper of cold brushed his neck, nothing more. Even at arm's length he could not see it. Drop it. Wisdom faded into view on his shoulder again. Michael exhaled quietly. So that's Dimensional Shroud. For a moment he just watched the owl preen its feathers, replaying what he had witnessed. A skill that erased presence. It was the kind of ability assassins would kill for. Even now, Michael's mind raced with the possibilities of its applications. He could already imagine himself using it. That skill alone could change the way I fight, he thought, a faint spark of hunger flickering in his eyes. Not bad, Michael muttered at last, a faint smile tugging at his lips. If I can't copy it now, I'll find another way. He patted Wisdom's head gently. For now, let's leave it at that. We still have 2 more skills to test. His tone turned calm again, his thoughts returning to the present. There would be time later to study Dimensional Shroud properly. After all, there was still Fold Blink and Singularity Pulse waiting to show what they could do. Michael's eyes fell on the next line of glowing text. Fold Blink, intermediate, instantly shifts the user through folded space. This was the ability that had caught his eye the moment he saw the description. Based on the explanation, it wasn't like phase shift at all. Phase shift was a temporary step into the edge of the void, a skill that phased the user between reality and unreality, allowing movement through the boundary that still connected both. It was powerful but not true teleportation. Fold Blink, however, was different. Michael's mind visualized the theory behind it. This time, Michael muttered under his breath, it really should be teleportation. Michael looked at Wisdom. All right, let's see what you can do, Fold Blink. Wisdom blinked, as though understanding the command through their shared bond. Chapter 667 Void. Okay. Michael heard a familiar childlike voice echo faintly in his mind through their bond, followed an instant later by the complete disappearance of the void feather. Michael's eyes sharpened. He immediately spread out his senses. The space inside the damaged coffin was vast, a little over 10,000 meters across, but this was not the limit of his perception. With his current strength, he could sweep the entire space as easily as someone running a hand across smooth glass. His senses expanded like a tidal wave, and then he found it. Michael sensed Wisdom at the very edge of the coffin dimension, perched near the curved boundary where the internal space dissolved into a swirling gray void. One moment Wisdom was in front of him. The next, he was 10,000 meters away, sitting calmly at the absolute edge of existence. Michael's eyes widened slightly in pure delight. So it really is teleportation, he whispered. The speed was absolute. If such a distance would take him a second, then for Wisdom, it would take him half a second. Compared to his Earth escape, this skill was a far better option. Does that mean it could be called space escape, Michael thought. Now the only issue was how big the drain was, how many times it could be cast, and if it had a cooldown. The skill description did not reveal this, so Michael had to find out for himself. A moment later Michael was by Wisdom's side, but contrary to his expectations that such a skill would be a huge drain, Wisdom was still very much lively. Even his Eye of Truth showed his energy did not reduce much, making Michael wonder if his eye was acting up. Left with no choice, Michael spoke with his tamed beast. Wisdom, Michael said calmly, do you feel tired? The silver-gray owl blinked up at him from the edge of the coffin space. For a moment there was silence. Then a small, sleepy voice drifted into Michael's mind. I feel sleepy. Michael's brows lifted. That part he expected. Fold Blink should have used a lot of mana. Even a single use should have strained a rank 2 creature's core. But before he could nod, another message came through. But I want to eat first. Michael blinked. Eat first. Wisdom bobbed his head firmly. Yes, sleep after eating. Michael stared at the bird for several long seconds. The first part, feeling sleepy, had almost confirmed his suspicion that Fold Blink drained Wisdom more than the Eye of Truth could detect. But the second part shattered that assumption. Michael had used absurd amounts of mana before. He knew the feeling. Exhaustion did not leave room for anything else. If one was lucky enough not to faint, the only thought left in their mind would be sleep. Nothing else mattered. But Wisdom, sleepy. But you still want to eat? Michael asked slowly. The owl bobbed again. Hungry. Pain. Before. Tired. These words brought a moment of clarity to Michael. So Wisdom was not feeling mana exhaustion but was just tired from evolving. It made sense, as mental exhaustion could also make one sleepy. So it was not severe mana depletion. If Wisdom could still think about food, then Fold Blink was not draining his energy the way Michael thought it would. Which meant one of two things. Either Wisdom's energy recovery was absurdly fast, or Fold Blink had some hidden mechanic behind it. Michael narrowed his eyes slightly. His Eye of Truth had shown almost no energy drop. Wisdom's behavior supported that, and Wisdom's spatial mutation might be changing how energy expenditure worked entirely. Michael exhaled slowly. So it is not mana exhaustion, he murmured. Michael watched Wisdom for a moment longer. The small creature blinked sleepily, waiting for his next question with innocent patience. He still had more to confirm. Wisdom, Michael asked, keeping his tone steady. Is this the furthest you can go with Fold Blink? He made sure not to phrase it in a way that would accidentally confuse the bird. Though the owl still had a childlike mind, Michael could already sense the change, the clarity, the sharpness. It was still young, but it had matured. and with time it would grow far beyond this. After several seconds, Wisdom answered, "No, not limit." Michael's eyes sharpened. "Not your limit," Wisdom chirped. "This place, too small." That answer made Michael pause. The coffin's inner space exceeded 10,000 meters, and yet Wisdom called it too small. Not for movement but for range. Michael felt a faint chill creep across his spine. "Too small," Wisdom repeated, nodding once. Michael's mind raced. If a creature at level 30, not even rank 3 yet, thought 10,000 meters was too small for proper use of fold blink, then what would its limit be in the outside world? 50,000 meters? 100,000? More? Michael drew in a slow breath. He felt he should not raise the value so he did not get disappointed in the future. "Do you mean you can go farther outside this place?" Michael asked. Wisdom bobbed his head. "Yes, outside, big. Much big." Michael's gaze deepened. So it was not just teleportation. It was not even close to its real limit. This coffin space simply could not provide the room necessary to test fully. Michael rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You really are becoming something unusual," Michael whispered. "A space beast with seemingly endless energy, huh?" Michael let his thoughts simmer for a while longer, then pulled them back under control. He was tempted to keep pushing to see just how far Fold Blink could really go, but Singularity Pulse was still waiting for attention. His gaze drifted toward the swirling gray void beyond the curved edge of the coffin space. Only then did he fully register where they were. Right at the boundary. Michael clicked his tongue softly. He had been so focused on Fold Blink that he had not paid attention to their location. Testing a spatial attack skill that condensed unstable spatial energy at the very edge of an artificial dimension was the kind of thing only an idiot or a madman would think was safe. He did not consider himself either. Chapter 668 Void 2. "Let us go back," Michael said calmly. Michael rested a hand lightly on Wisdom's head and stepped away from the boundary. In the next instant, his figure blurred as he activated his movement technique, crossing the distance in a few strides. A heartbeat later, a soft ripple in the air beside him announced Wisdom's return as the void feather blinked back to his shoulder. The familiar sight of his undead in their meditative poses, arranged across the broader center of the coffin space, calmed him. Here, even if something went out of control, the worst outcome would simply be collateral damage he could repair. Destroying or cracking the coffin itself, on the other hand, was something he had no intention of risking. Wisdom shifted on his shoulder, his claws lightly gripping the fabric of Michael's black top. Michael almost gave another order. He wanted to see if Wisdom could teleport while carrying someone. If Fold Blink could shift the caster and a target in contact, then the value of that skill would rise to another level. Escape, infiltration, repositioning, dragging enemies into lethal crossfires, the possibilities stacked rapidly in his mind. But he stopped himself. Wisdom had just evolved. Even Michael did not fully understand the new limits of its abilities. For now, the bird was like a child holding a blade meant for a veteran. Could cut, could also slip. Michael exhaled quietly. Later, he decided silently, when you are more used to yourself. He raised his hand, and Wisdom hopped neatly from his shoulder onto his palm, silver feathers rustling softly. "Let's test the last skill, then you will go eat." Singularity Pulse Intermediate condenses unstable spatial energy into a single point before releasing it outward. Damage and scale increase based on the amount of spatial distortion compressed. Michael's eyes lingered on the description. He glanced at Wisdom, who blinked up at him from his palm. "Can you use it?" Michael asked. He did not need to explain anything. The system handled that. As long as the skill name was on one's panel, one would instinctively know how to activate it. This was why Wisdom had used Dimensional Shroud and Fold Blink so smoothly even right after evolving. The Void Feather gave a small hoot, then nodded. "Yes, I know." Michael stepped back, giving the creature space. Wisdom flapped once and hovered in the air, wings spreading slightly. The air around him trembled. Michael immediately felt the shift. Space was not warping violently, but it was buckling, as if something invisible were being squeezed between the bird's talons. Wisdom closed his green eyes in concentration. A faint sphere of distortion formed between his wings. It did not glow. It did not make a sound. Instead, it bent the surrounding air inward, twisting lines of existence like ripples pulled into a drain. Michael's eyes narrowed. He raised his hand. Hold it. Do not release. The distortion sphere pulsed once, violently. A tremor swept through the coffin space. Several undead opened, their eyes slightly. Michael's expression remained calm, but his voice sharpened. Release it, Michael ordered. A ripple passed through the space as Wisdom blurred out of sight, reappearing a moment later several dozen meters away. Close enough for Michael to observe but far enough to avoid harming the others. A clear surrounding. The sphere of distortion followed him, trembling wildly now that it was no longer restrained. Michael planted his feet. His gaze sharpened. Good. Now release it. Wisdom's wings tensed. The spatial sphere collapsed. Silently. Then the space in front of Wisdom twisted like wet cloth wrung by invisible hands. The next moment the world tore open. A soundless shock ripped outward, flattening the air with crushing force. A ring of warped space expanded from the collapse point, shredding the ground into splintered fragments. A jagged trench carved itself forward, deep and uneven. The edges of the tier quivered, refusing to settle back into proper shape. The meditating rank 2 undead snapped their eyes open. Even Michael felt pressure push against his chest. Devastating, he whispered. Then his senses sharpened. Wisdom dropped like something had yanked the strength clean out of his small body. The void feather crashed onto the cracked ground, wings twitching. Weakly, Michael moved instantly. He appeared beside Wisdom, and the eye of truth flared to full intensity, piercing straight into the creature's core. What he saw made his expression shift. Unlike Dimensional Shroud, unlike Fold Blink, this time Wisdom's energy was visibly drained. Wisdom let out a low, weak hoot. Michael knelt and placed a steady hand on the creature's side. Wisdom's breathing was shallow. His feathers drooped. His claws twitched faintly on the fractured ground. Michael examined the readings again. The depletion was not small. It was massive, enough to send any other rank 2 creature into a coma. He lifted Wisdom gently, his hand firm under the creature's small body. The void feather sagged against his palm, too tired to resist. I understand now. Michael's voice lowered as the pieces clicked together in his mind. He lifted his gaze toward the swirling gray horizon of the coffin space, toward the faint, trembling curtain of void that surrounded them. A memory surfaced, a passage he had once read. The void is the place with the most abundant raw energy in the universe. Those who fight in it draw strength from it. Rank 3 and above do not weaken there. They grow stronger. Michael stared at the fading torn mark left behind by singularity. Pulse. Then his gaze fell on Wisdom, the strange, invisible energy that always moved around the small owl. So that is it. He had been asking the wrong question from the beginning. It was not that Fold Blink did not consume energy. It was that something else was feeding it. His lips pressed together. The void. The very same energy that overflowed beyond the coffin's boundary. Michael looked down at Wisdom again. A thought crossed his mind. The void did not only exist here. It existed everywhere. Chapter 669 Preparation. Edited. Refresh to clear duplicate. Like that, several days passed. Coincidentally, in both of his worlds, Michael was preparing to head out. In the land of origin, the Michael who bore the title of Lord did not have much to pack. His greatest preparation was not weapons or supplies but people. He spent those days making sure the territory could function smoothly in his absence, finalizing instructions for Rohan and the others. Once he left with a certain princess to explore the ruin of a so-called strong man. He wanted Thornvale to keep running as if he had never stepped away. On Aurora, The other Michael also did not have much to prepare on the surface. His destination, however, was very different. While one Michael was heading toward an ancient ruin, the other was preparing to follow his year mates into hell. There were no territories to manage here. His days remained almost deceptively ordinary. At most he quietly adjusted his schedule so his body and mind would be in their best state when the time came. But in the land of origin, Michael used those same days for something else as well. He studied wisdom. Not openly, of course. After all, he had lied. To a certain princess no less. He had already told her that the owl her family gifted him had died for no reason. He even blamed it on the creature's strange mutation, using wisdom's earlier transformation to solidify the story. It was the perfect excuse. No one could ever be fully certain about a miracle mutation in such a weak animal. Sometimes they lived. Sometimes they died. Sometimes they became something else entirely. And the princess had believed him. So Michael made sure wisdom was kept hidden. Michael's private observations during those quiet days confirmed something important. As long as wisdom's actions remained within the gentle lines of space, sliding through it, folding it, slipping between its seams without disturbing its balance, the bird used little to no mana. It was almost effortless, as if space itself welcomed him. But the moment wisdom tried to corrupt that space like he had with Singularity Pulse, everything changed. The burden shifted back onto wisdom. He was forced to use his own mana, and even that was not enough. He exhausted himself because he was still weak, not because the skill was too heavy, but because he was too small to bear even a fraction of the cost. The greater cost, the true cost, was being paid by the void. Every time wisdom bent space without damaging it, the void flowed through him freely, supporting the action like a gentle tide. But the moment wisdom ruptured space or forced it to collapse, the void demanded a price he could not afford. This strange relationship pushed Michael into what could only be described as a research frenzy in Aurora. While the Lord of Thornvale quietly observed wisdom in hidden corners of the mansion and the coffin space, the student Michael buried himself in texts, visiting the library during every spare hour. Took days, but he eventually found a hint of an answer. There are times in the universe when children of elements are born. It explained everything. Children of elements were not ordinary creatures. They were beings naturally aligned with the primal forces of existence. Some were born like that from the moment their consciousness sparked. Others were forged over countless years, tempering themselves until the world itself acknowledged them. The ones born with it were the most famous. Creatures like the phoenix and the Qilin. Creatures like dragons. Living sovereigns who carried the laws of the world in their breath. These were beings so deeply in tune with their element that they were part of the world itself. Fire was not something a phoenix used. Fire was what it was. The same went for the others. They existed at the boundary between creature and natural force, neither fully one nor the other. Their bodies were perfect vessels for their element, and the element in turn treated them as kin. But these beings were rare. Far more often, supernaturals had to earn that connection. They needed to climb high, so high that their existence reached a point where the world accepted them as part of its fabric. It was not the same as drawing mana from the air. That was basic. This was something deeper, something like borrowing the strength of the world itself. If one grew strong enough, they could begin tapping into that force. The world would stop resisting them. It would start feeding them instead. However, that was the part that confused Michael. By all standards, at the moment he was something close to a pseudo-god. So why was he not like that yet? Why was the world not feeding him? Was it because he was fake, an imitation god without roots? Or was it the opposite? Perhaps he needed to become something much more than just a god in order for the world to acknowledge him as its own. The thoughts circled a few times, each possibility leading to more questions. Even without answers, he knew they were things that belonged to a future version of himself. For now, he pushed them aside and returned his focus to wisdom. After digging further, he finally came to a conclusion. Wisdom was in an awkward situation. Painfully awkward. It reminded Michael of the very first day he found the little bird, fragile, yet possessing a power far beyond what it should have held. Now, after evolving, the situation was almost the same, only more complicated. The more Michael pieced things together, the clearer the truth became. Wisdom had not become a true void-feather bird. Far from it. The merge had not been fully successful. It was a failed merge, a miracle failure, but a failure nonetheless. According to Michael's estimates, a true void-feather bird was not something that crawled at rank 2. A real one should be born at rank 3 or close to it, a creature of space, a child of the void. But wisdom was far from that. Oh, he had the traits. Fold blink, dimensional shroud, singularity. Pulse. He had void affinity. But his body was weak, fragile, and underdeveloped. He was a rank 2 creature wearing the skin of something born to dominate. Michael's talent had forcefully changed him. So wisdom was not a proper void feather but a defective one. Still, Michael was satisfied. Defective or not, with his talents and with time, wisdom would eventually become a true void feather, or even something greater than that. His current state was simply incomplete. The foundation was unstable, but the potential was frightening. In any case, research was not the only thing Michael had done during those days. He also tested wisdom's speed. With the amplification from the void, the bird's speed surpassed anything a rank 2 creature should possess. After repeating the test dozens of times, Michael reached a simple conclusion. At least rank 3 and below, if they cannot trap him, they cannot catch him. This was not arrogance. It was fact. One moment wisdom was there. The next he was gone. If one could not imprison space itself, they would never lay a hand on wisdom. Against an opponent that fought purely with speed, the void feather would slip away again and again. That alone placed wisdom far above his current rank. Michael had also tested the range of fold blink properly. He tested it in the Everlong forest where there was real distance to work with, and no curious eyes watching. The results shocked even him. 50,000 meters. That was the maximum range wisdom could reach in one blink. And the cooldown was 10 seconds. That was all. All of this with no significant mana cost. Michael had also taken a risk. He let wisdom carry him. He had been hesitant at first. Fold blink was effortless when wisdom only moved himself. But adding another person raised questions. Would the void still support it? Would the space around them destabilize? There was only one way to find out. So he tried. And it worked. Except this time there were significant costs. Wisdom could only carry one person and teleport 3 times at maximum range. It was still good. Better than good. Michael still liked it. For escaping, it was gold. Escape, repositioning, ambush, retreat. It was perfection. And Michael knew it. That was why Michael attempted to use his skill, taming, and used copy on wisdom. He went with the random route. In any case, any of the skills were good for him, but there were particular ones he preferred. Dimensional Shroud and Fold Blink. The third skill was also not bad, but the possibility that the skill could fail to copy anything at all had made Michael nervous. Adding everything together, the chances of failure were higher than the chances of success. The final results was that Michael. Sorry for the previous mishap. Chapter 670 Luck? Michael's luck was still as insufficient as he had always remembered. He did get a skill, but it was not any of the new skills he wanted. It was a familiar one. Phase Shift. The copy brought his mastery to Advanced, which was a huge leap from Basic. One could say he had benefited massively, especially considering the high chance of failure, and Michael knew this. Even so, when he compared it to the nature of the other skills, he could not bring himself to be fully satisfied. In the end, Michael had no choice but to accept it. Phase Shift was still a great skill. It was not what he wanted, but it was not useless either. With the mastery now at Advanced, the improvement was tremendous. He knew that logically, but emotionally he still felt a sting. It was hard not to imagine what Fold Blink or Dimensional Shroud would have done for him. Even so, he understood that luck had at least granted him something instead of nothing. With the chance of failure being so high, getting any skill at all was already a victory. Michael accepted the result with a quiet sigh. Like that, the day of departure arrived for both Michaels. One was heading toward the capital to discuss an ancient ruin tied to the legacy of a so-called strong man. The other was going with his year-mates into hell itself. In a certain room, Michael and a few other young people of similar ages waited. The atmosphere was quiet but tense. Unsurprisingly, he was glanced at more than once. That was normal. People always looked. But what did surprise him was Rin choosing to sit close to him. Michael turned his head slightly and stared at her for a moment. She did acknowledge the look and did not seem bothered by the proximity. Her expression was calm, almost bland. Seeing nothing unusual, Michael looked away. In any case, she was free to sit wherever she wanted. It was not as if they were enemies. They were simply two people heading to the same destination. He shifted his attention back to the rest of the room. Everyone inside was a first year. Out of 200 new students this year, only 24 had chosen to go aside from the mandatory 3. The rest wanted to return home. Michael did not think he was in a position to judge. People had their reasons. Even so, he could not help but feel a bit disappointed. It was said that in cultivation academies all students would eventually enter hell. Even though first years only went to the first floor, everyone accepted it as a necessary step. Yet here, in an academy of awakeners who were exceptionally stronger than cultivators, at least before rank 3, so many hesitated. He found it strange. He found it disappointing. But it was not his place to force anything on anyone. Michael leaned back slightly in his seat and continued observing the young people around him. Everyone was visibly suited beneath the robes they wore. Michael was no different. Under his loose academy robe, he wore his black armor, fitted cleanly against his body. The ones who stood out in this regard were few, and Rin was one of them. She had no visible armor at all. At first glance she looked almost too relaxed, sitting there in a simple academy uniform. Michael's gaze lingered on her for a moment. Then he remembered. In their previous bout, she had not worn a visible suit before the battle either. The armor had appeared the moment the fight began. One instant she had been standing in her uniform. The next her suit had formed around her as if it had always been there. Thinking about that, it felt normal that she did not look geared up. Even so, Michael could not help but wonder how much power she could output now. The last suit had been destroyed. He had seen it shatter. Had she received a replacement of the same grade, something weaker or something stronger? His curiosity stirred, but he did not ask. It would have been an insensitive topic to bring up so casually. So he kept his questions to himself. Michael shifted his gaze away and continued to observe the others in the room. Suddenly, the door slid open. A woman stepped inside. Instructor Sarah Cade. Michael recognized her immediately. She was the same instructor who had overseen his duel with Rin. "Good. You are all here," she said. Her voice carried easily, filling the room without effort. She offered a brief nod, acknowledging the group as a whole rather than any individual. "I will be the one taking you to hell. If you are here, it means you have chosen to participate of your own will," Sarah said. "I respect that decision. Most of your peers chose not to come. Whether they were right or wrong, time will tell. But you made your choice. That alone shows something." Then her gaze finally came to him. "Rank 3 prowess or not, the moment we enter hell, you are the same as everyone here," she said plainly. "Do not rely on strength alone. Hell is not a place where arrogance is tolerated." Michael nodded slightly. He did not take it as an insult. It was a warning. "Fair one." Sarah looked away again. "We will depart in 10 minutes. After that, you will have no time for preparation again." 10 minutes passed. Then Instructor Sarah Cade spoke again. "Time is up. Stand. We are leaving." Sarah turned without waiting for acknowledgement and strode toward the door. "Follow me." Michael joined the moving line of students filing out behind her. Their footsteps echoed faintly as they were led deeper into the academy grounds. She took them toward a section of campus none of the first years had entered before, a restricted zone walled off and guarded by subtle barriers. Most students only knew of it through rumors. The Gate Division, the place where portals to other locations were handled. They passed through a set of reinforced doors and barriers. Chapter 671 Hell's Gate. Cool air brushed their faces as they finally stepped inside. Michael's eyes narrowed. There were other people already waiting within the large hall. Their robes were different, dark gray with silver trims, marking them as assistant teachers. Each one of them carried the quiet confidence of someone at the peak of rank 2 or at least very close to it. Michael recognized one or two from lectures. What are they doing here? His question answered itself a moment later, because ahead of them, occupying the center of the room, was a massive circular platform. A teleportation array. Wide. Engraved with overlapping rings of intricate symbols, enchanted lines, and glowing mana channels that rippled faintly like breathing light. The entire structure hummed with spatial energy. Even before stepping close, Michael could feel it, the subtle distortion in the air, the faint sensation of being pulled forward and pushed back at the same time. This was no practice device. This was an academy-grade long-distance gate. Sarah gave them a moment to take in the sight of the array before she began speaking again. This is the primary gate used by the Academy for long-distance transport, she said. The headquarters may be here, but the Academy has outposts all over the realm. She rested a hand lightly on the edge of the glowing platform. Transportation between these sites is one of the reasons we maintain arrays like this. They allow us to move instructors, resources, and response teams quickly. For students, you only get access on special occasions. Sarah continued walking around the array, her voice steady. Of course, the outposts are not the only places we can travel to. The Academy maintains direct routes to multiple restricted zones. She paused, then looked at them directly. And today, every Awakener Academy across Aurora is sending people to one place. The room fell completely quiet. The Gate of Hell, she said, guarded jointly by the Federation. A faint ripple of unease passed through the students. Michael felt none of the fear the others showed. If anything, he felt a mild curiosity. So the Federation guarded it. He wondered what rank the station guards were. Sarah continued. The Gate of Hell does not stay open on its own. It is stabilized by the Federation's spatial anchors and can only be used under supervision. All academies coordinate their entries at the same time to reduce instability. She lifted her hand and gestured toward the assistant teachers standing around the formation. These people will maintain the array during our departure. They will ensure the teleportation holds steady. After that, they will not accompany you. She stepped onto the platform and signaled for them to form up. The runes beneath her feet pulsed. The assistant teachers placed their hands on the anchor points. Michael took his place. The humming beneath the platform grew deeper, vibrating faintly through his boots. Then, almost as an afterthought, Sarah's gaze flicked toward Michael again. And remember, in hell no one is special. Light surged, the array awakened, the world twisted, and the teleportation began. Michael felt the world stretch. His vision blurred into streaks of white, then darkness, then something else entirely. A soft thud echoed under his boots. Solid ground. His senses rushed back all at once. He exhaled slowly, trying to adjust. Thanks to his constitution and occasional training with wisdom, he was not as affected as others. But the fact that he could still feel the pull showed that they had crossed a distance far greater than anything wisdom could reach in one blink. They were no longer in the Academy's secret realm. Instead, a vast clearing stretched out before him. Behind him, Michael turned, raising a brow. A forest. A massive one. One moment they had been standing atop a crafted array deep inside. The Academy. The next they were simply here. Is this still the real world? Michael could not tell. For all he knew, this could be a controlled pocket realm maintained by the Federation. Michael scanned the surroundings, and directly ahead of him was a row of buildings. Tall, metallic, multi-story units arranged in an organized line. And scattered around were people. A lot of people. Most were young, roughly his age, wearing different academy uniforms. Their crests, colors, and styles varied. Beside them stood soldiers in full combat gear. Black exosuits, reinforced plating, energy-powered rifles, and helmets with glowing visor lines. The soldiers watched everything with casual sharpness, hands never far from their weapons. Instructor Sarah was already striding forward. "Follow me," she said, not raising her voice yet, still heard clearly by all of them. Michael walked behind her with the rest of his group. At first, he had planned to observe everything closely. New surroundings always meant new information. But very quickly he stopped, because the gazes started. Not from his academy group, but from the young people around the outpost. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. Some widened, some narrowed. Some looked like they had just spotted a mythical creature. A few whispered to one another, not quietly enough. "That is him. The Michael Norman. Didn't they say his power output reached rank 3? Monstrous." Michael felt them all. He ignored them. He tried to, but they kept staring. If anything, it felt more like people studying a dangerous beast rather than a fellow student. They were all participants of the Unified College exams, all brought here by the 10 first-rank academies. And they were looking at him like he was something else entirely. Michael's lips twitched faintly. He had wanted to look around, but under so many eyes, the interest dissolved. He simply followed Sarah in silence, movements relaxed, gaze indifferent. If they wanted to stare, let them stare. He was used to being an anomaly by now. Rin walked beside him, quiet as always, her expression unreadable. Sarah led them past the soldiers, who assessed each student with the precision of trained professionals. Their gazes paused slightly longer on Michael, but unlike the students, theirs carried no awe or confusion, only evaluation. Michael pretended not to notice. They continued forward until they approached a large military checkpoint where 2 towering armored gates formed the entrance into the compound. Above the gate, a glowing sign flickered with cold blue light. Outpost 7. Hell Gate Perimeter. Authorized personnel only. Sarah stopped and turned toward her group. Chapter 672 Demons. Far away from Outpost 7 was a place where the world burned. The sky was red. There was no sun, only a restless glow that seemed to seep from the sky itself, as if the heavens were made of slow-flowing magma. The air was hot enough to sting the lungs. On a jagged plain of black rock, a crowd of creatures moved. They did not resemble any animal. Their skin ranged from charred black to sickly violet and dull crimson. Some walked on 2 legs, some on 4, some slithered, some crawled. A few had wings that twitched and flexed in the dry heat. To the eyes of an ordinary human, there was only one word for them: demons. They hunted. They fought. They traded roars and shrieks in a language of growls and guttural sounds. Smaller ones scattered when larger forms passed. Predators watched other predators, waiting for the slightest sign of weakness. This was daily life here. Near the base of a broken mountain, a dark maw opened in the rock. A cave. Inside, the heat grew worse. Molten veins of lava pulsed in the walls, casting flickering light over the rough interior. At the end of the cavern, a crude throne had been carved into an outcropping of rock. Skulls, broken armor, and twisted metal ornaments surrounded it in scattered piles. On that throne sat a demon, huge, humanoid in shape. Its shoulders were broad enough to put an ogre to shame. The skin was dark red. 2 horns curled back from its forehead, black and ridged like blades that had grown from bone. Yellow eyes burned in its skull, pupils thin and sharp. When it shifted, the rock under it creaked. This was no common beast. This was a demon lord, one of the rulers of this place. This place was not simply a world. It was one part of something far larger. Hell. Hell was not a single world. Hell was many worlds stacked together. To be fair, one could call it a universe of its own. Hell had 100 worlds, and everywhere, on every floor, demons lived. Each floor had its own ecology, its own hierarchy, its own brutal society. On the lower floors, demons were weaker and more savage. Imp-like creatures, twisted hounds, and small winged fiends. Higher up, things changed. From a certain point onward, true rulers began to appear. Demon lords. They were not born on the first floor. A few rumors claimed that fallen lords sometimes crashed down to the lower levels, but native demon lords began to appear only after a certain threshold. Above the 20th floor, some worlds already had them. Above the 30th floor, their presence was guaranteed. From that point on, any floor could be under the dominion of one or several demon lords, beings who had risen above the common infernal masses. They held territories and commanded armies. Each step upward through the floors increased the pressure. Demons on the 40th floor were far stronger than those on the 20th. Demons on the 60th would crush those below without effort. And the demon lords followed the same rule. Low-floor demon lords ruled over hordes that looked impressive but were, by the standards of hell, still weak. Compared to the higher realms, they were nothing more than local chiefs. Mid-floor demon lords were true rulers. Their names carried weight across multiple floors. Their power was great enough that even among demons they were spoken of in grudging respect. Above them stood the high demon lords. Some called themselves Demon Prince. Each of these beings was strong enough to annihilate worlds on the lower floors if given the time and freedom to do so. Their existence distorted their surroundings. Their mere presence twisted the land. Above even these high demon lords, the so-called demon princes, there were beings that almost no one in the lower worlds of hell ever witnessed. The 7 demon kings, known collectively as the 7 sins: pride, wrath, greed, envy, lust, gluttony, sloth. 7 thrones scattered across the highest layers of hell. 7 monsters who had climbed beyond the level of ordinary demon princes, each embodying one sin so completely that their existence bent reality around it. And above even them on the final floor was something else, the demon god. But on the 30th floor, the demon lord sitting upon the crude throne was not thinking about kings or princes. He was thinking about himself. His eyes burned with awareness. He was alive again. He flexed his claws slowly. He had resurrected recently. A moment passed, and he let out a slow breath, tasting ash and molten air on his tongue. In fact, this was not his first time resurrecting. Far from it. Demons never truly died. Their souls were bound to hell, dragged back by the fabric of the realm itself. But ironically, the demons that died the most, the ones that died the loudest and most violently, were not the weaklings. It was the lower demon lords. From the 30th floor upward, resurrection was almost a requirement. To rise higher, one needed to die or to have died at least once. Only then could the threads of hell accept them as candidates for ascension. Of course, this came with a cost. Lower demon lords were not easy to kill, but compared to the monsters above, they might as well have been newborns. There were many beings powerful enough to hunt them. So many, in fact, that entire groups waited on certain floors for the precise purpose of killing resurrecting demon lords the moment they reappeared. It was miserable, a humiliating cycle. Resurrect, killed, resurrect again, killed again, over and over until either the demon lord clawed upward by sheer stubborn survival or collapsed into permanent oblivion. This demon lord knew that routine very well, which is why his eyes narrowed now. Because this time, when he resurrected on his old throne, the cavern was empty. No hunters stood around. No blades waited to pierce him. No ambushers ready to tear his head off before his consciousness settled. Silence. Heat. Stillness. This had only happened a few times in the last several hundred years. He slowly rose from the throne. The molten veins in the walls pulsed, like the heartbeat of hell itself. He lifted his head, sniffing the air, searching for traces of the killers who usually waited for him. Nothing. A rare and dangerous thought entered his mind. Now that he had reappeared, anyone from the lower floors would struggle to descend. His presence would block the path downwards. To all but the strongest. That thought should have made him wary. Instead, he chuckled. A low, rolling sound echoed through the cavern, making the lesser demons outside flinch. He did not know what was happening above. He did not know why. The hunters who usually waited to tear him apart were missing. What he did know was simple. If his time on this floor was going to be short again, then he would use it. Enjoy it. It would be a waste, he rumbled, voice like grinding boulders, To spend a fresh life sitting here. His clawed hand tightened on the armrest, and he pushed himself fully to his feet. He thought of the floors below. The pubs. It had been a long time since he visited. Too long. His tongue dragged across sharp teeth as another hunger stirred. It was one thing to tear apart lesser demons. Their blood was hot and bitter, useful but ordinary. What lingered in his memory was different. The blood of other races. Mortals dragged from conquered worlds. Creatures from distant realms. Every race carried a different taste, a different weight of power and soul. And among them, one race stood out in his memory. Elves. Their blood was bright. Their flesh was firm. Their souls burned clean and sharp. Among demons, there were endless arguments about what tasted best, what gave the greatest rush of stolen power. Elves were always in the top 3, and in his personal opinion, they were the best in everything. Fine slaves, fine trophies, fine meals. His lips curled into a cruel smile. Perhaps, he murmured, I can find an elf again. He stepped down from the throne. The cavern trembled faintly under his weight. Outside, the demons on the plain felt his presence move and scattered out of instinct. If something stronger had come from above, if some great will was pressing down on the 30th floor, then it would reveal itself in time. Until then, he would walk his domain, drink in the pubs of the lower floors, crush whatever dared to stand in his way. And if fate was feeling generous, he would taste elven blood again, before someone killed him for the next resurrection. Meanwhile, in Aurora, ignorant to what was happening in hell, many academies were ready to send their students there. Michael on his end had already placed his robe in his storage space and had his black armor in full view. Chapter 673, First Floor. To be honest, the armor on Michael right now would not be able to handle any real damage that could harm him. At his current level, the suit was more symbolic than functional. If something was strong enough to injure him, the armor would shatter before it made any difference. If anything, wearing it was simply to look the part. Because if he did not wear it, he would stand out even more than Rin. A mage walking into a realm filled with monsters and hostile creatures while wearing nothing but a loose robe would draw too many eyes. So the armor remained on him. Michael looked around at his environment. The outpost was far more crowded than before. At this point, the number of students from all the Awakener academies in Aurora that would be entering Hell had finally gathered, turning the entire space into a lively place. Most students had already stored their academy robes away. Without the crests and colors that usually marked their identities, it was almost impossible to tell who belonged to which academy unless they were standing with their own groups. But it did not matter. Everyone here was human. In Hell, academy rivalry meant nothing. Down there, they were on one side and everything else was on the other. Michael heard an instructor nearby reminding a cluster of students of the rules. The man spoke loudly enough that the message spread to those around him. Monsters would not be the only threat. Other races existed in Hell. Some were violent. Some attacked humans on sight. Some hunted humans deliberately. In the past, there had even been incidents where other races caused more casualties than demons. The warning was simple. Be careful. Stay alert. If possible, group up. Strength in numbers. Michael watched the different students react. Though the warning also made his mood solemn, it also increased his interest. Fortunately, he didn't have to wait for long as soon the students were led to a huge portal inside of a huge building. The portal was a chaotic mix of colors, and around the portal were Federation soldiers with better strength and equipments than the ones outside. This part of the outpost existed partly for defense. The soldiers here were not only stationed to guide people through the gate of hell. They were also here to guard against the rare occasions when demons broke through. And even worse, against the demonic supernaturals who sometimes slipped out to cause trouble in the human realm. The presence of stronger troops made sense. Inside the building, the air shifted as a new figure stepped forward. An old man in a sleek exosuit approached the gathered students with an easy smile on his face. His stride was calm and confident, and the soldiers nearby stood a little straighter out of respect. Michael did not use any of his abilities on the man, yet he could feel it. The quiet pressure. At least rank 3. A strong one. The old man's smile deepened as he looked over the large crowd. You children are the future of the Federation, he said. His tone was warm, almost grandfatherly. Be proud, he continued. I will explain this part clearly even if your instructors have told you already, because understanding it is important for your safety. He gestured toward the massive swirling portal behind him. This particular Hell Gate is stabilized by the Federation. It leads directly to the first floor of Hell. His smile faded slightly, replaced by a more serious look. And unlike your return trip, entering the portal means you will arrive in random locations. You will not land beside your friends. You will not appear as a group. A ripple of unease moved through some of the younger students. So for the sake of safety, group up as soon as you find yourselves in that world. At least at the beginning. The first floor holds no real danger to awakeners of your strength. Demons there are too weak to threaten you. But remember something. He lifted a finger. You are not the only ones there. Silence. His voice dropped lower. If you grow careless and fall to another race, you will regret it or might not even have the chance to regret it. He clapped his hands, and a soldier stepped forward with a metal case. The old man opened it. Inside were dozens of small devices that looked like a hybrid of a wristwatch and a compass. The soldiers moved through the crowd, handing one to each student. These devices will only activate inside Hell. Once you enter, the pointer will guide you to the Federation station on the first floor. Michael accepted his own device. The old man gave them all one final smile. Remember, this is only the first floor. Think of it as your introduction. Learn, adapt, and make your academies proud. He stepped back. Soldiers raised their weapons in a ready stance. The portal pulsed brighter, swirling with violent colors that twisted, like liquid flame and shattered glass. Michael felt the faint pull of spatial energy. Rin stepped forward. The instructors signaled. It was time. Rin stepped through the portal. Michael followed. The world tour. For a brief moment there was nothing. Then everything slammed back together. His boots sank into something that crunched. Michael blinked. Snow. He stood in the middle of a vast white expanse. The sky above him was a pale gray sheet, heavy and still with faint streaks of darker clouds drifting slowly across it. There was no sun. Wind moved across the frozen land, carrying flakes of snow that brushed against his armor and skin. Michael looked down. Beneath his boots, a thick layer of packed snow covered the ground. Here and there, jagged black stone jutted out like broken teeth, but most of the landscape was buried under white. In the distance, frost-covered mountains rose sharp and severe. There, peaks lost to the low-hanging clouds. The air tasted clean. Too clean for what people usually imagined when they thought of Hell. Chapter 674 Strange, edited. For a moment, if not for the subtle weight in the air and the strange stillness, this could have been some remote icy wasteland in the human realm. Michael stood very still and let his senses adjust. One should not be deceived. Just because it was called Hell did not mean everything was fire and lava. There was a reason people said each floor was like its own world. He knew that, yet seeing it with his own eyes was different. It did not feel like he had entered Hell at all. Michael drew in a slow breath. He released that breath as a misty cloud that drifted away on the cold wind. Then he closed his eyes and let his senses expand. 100 meters, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 meters. His awareness settled across the frozen plains, tracing every shift in the wind, every disturbance in the snow, every flicker of movement across the icy surface. Nothing. No demons, no other races, no lurking beasts. More importantly, no other students. He was completely alone. So it is safe. For now. Without hesitation, Michael reached inward and summoned the palm-sized, damaged coffin of the Forgotten. Two shadows slipped out from the coffin. The air rippled as the two undead materialized beside him briefly, taking on their humanoid forms before dissolving into streaks of color. A heartbeat later, they both fluttered around him like streaks of soft light and then, click, they settled against his ears, transforming smoothly into butterfly-shaped earrings. Blue on the left, purple on the right. Before entering the gate, he had stored them away due to worries that the portal might identify them as individual entities and they'll separate. Now that he was in hell, he didn't have such worries again. Michael raised his wrist and tapped the compact watch the Federation officer had given them. A single arrow appeared, glowing with a pulsing light, pointed to his right. Michael nodded. Good. At least I won't wander aimlessly. He looked out across the endless white plains. The landscape stretched so far that even with his vision, nothing broke the horizon but snow, stone, and distant mountains. He tilted the watch slightly, watching the pointer adjust and tug toward the same direction again, confirming the route. This small thing was going to be his guide. He thought back to the Academy's evaluation mission. The goal was simple in words, difficult in execution. Pass 5 floors of hell. Bring back proof of a demon from the 5th floor. Only then would the evaluation be complete. To accomplish that, he needed to find the entrance to the 2nd floor, then the 3rd, then the 4th, and eventually the 5th. Diving in blindly would be foolish, not dangerous for him, but a waste of time. He glanced at the compass again. Better to head to the Federation station first. Gather information, confirm routes, understand current floor conditions. Then move. Michael glanced once more at the endless icy landscape. Hell, huh? He shook his head. Still did not feel like hell. But he knew better. The moment he relaxed, it would remind him. Michael started walking, boots crunching softly through the snow. Each step was steady, unhurried, leaving a faint trail behind him that the wind slowly began to swallow. The arrow on the compact watch remained firm, tugging him toward the Federation station far beyond. The horizon. He kept his senses spread wide, always 5,000 meters out, always scanning. The world here was quiet. Michael moved for several minutes without incident, letting the rhythm of the snow and wind guide his thoughts. Then, his senses twitched. Something entered the edge of his awareness. 2 signatures clashing repeatedly, kicking up waves of energy that rippled faintly through the frozen ground. A fight, but that wasn't what made him pause. It was the nature of the signatures. Something clicked in Michael's mind, and his heartbeat thumped. Once, just a little faster. A guess formed. His anticipation sharpened. His lips twitched slightly. He didn't think he would encounter one this soon. But he didn't jump to conclusions. Assumptions in hell were dangerous even for him. Let's see. In the next instant, Michael blurred from his spot. Snow exploded behind him as he shot forward, moving like a streak. Across the frozen plains. He cut through the cold wind, his senses locked on the chaotic clash far ahead. The compass on his wrist flickered from the sudden acceleration. But he ignored it. He wasn't changing course permanently, just taking a small detour. Michael closed the distance in seconds and slowed just enough to stay unseen. Snow drifted lazily around him as he stopped atop a jagged ridge of black stone, gaze sweeping downward. The clash he sensed came into full view. 2 figures tore across the snow-covered ground, each movement carving violent streaks into the white landscape. The first was a tall warrior wrapped in nothing but an animal skin. Skirt, his muscles thick and corded like braided steel. His skin held a faint earthy glow, and his feet barely sank into the snow. Every step seemed to carry the weight of a mountain. He held a huge bone sword. His opponent was another tall figure but far different. He looked far less intimidating physically. Slimmer, more graceful, almost delicate. He fought defensively, steps light, almost floating above the snow. His blade shimmered with faint mana, each parry producing a soft metallic hum. Compared to the hulking warrior, he seemed fragile. But he was fast, precise, and despite being pushed back again and again, he had not fallen. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly as the details became clearer. The massive warrior in the animal skin skirt wasn't just any brute. He was a barbarian, but not the kind Earth's history books would describe. This one belonged to a race said to come from the ancient tribe. Realm. Michael had read about them. A world of warring clans, a culture built on trial by blood, a realm where children lifted boulders before they learned to speak. Barbarians from the ancient realm were famous for their absurd physicality, their natural connection to the land, and their terrifying combat instincts. But something was wrong. Chapter 675 Arrival. In this universe, the concept of race was very real and very strict. It was not like on Earth, where people spoke about race, but in the end everyone was still human. Here, that did not apply. Even beings who looked like humans were not necessarily human or called that. Even among humans themselves, things grew complicated. The people of Aurora saw themselves simply as humans, but out there in the wider universe, other human branches existed. When other races spoke about them, they did not say humans. They said Aurora humans. To the universe, they were just one branch among many. Imperial humans, celestial humans, void-born humans, each with their own talents, history, and bloodline quirks. So when Michael looked at the warrior below, he did not just see a strong man in an animal skin skirt. He saw a race. And races did not mix so easily. Aside from races that coexisted peacefully in the same realm, or those who formed alliances, or those whose worlds overlapped long enough to influence each other, mixed bloods in the universe often lived difficult lives. Some mixed bloods were celebrated if their parent races were close allies. Some were tolerated. But many carried a strange and unfair burden. Discrimination from both sides. A child born between two incompatible races might be rejected by both. Considered impure. Considered a mistake. Considered something that did not belong anywhere. As Michael watched the fight below, this truth slipped into his thoughts. The large barbarian was definitely pure-blooded from the ancient tribe realm. But the other one, the slender barbarian with the light steps and delicate frame, a barbarian should not look like that. Michael knew a bit about the variants of barbarians to know. He was surely a mixed-born. What race is he really? Michael wondered silently. And is it okay for me to keep watching like this? There was etiquette in the supernatural universe. Spying on others mid-battle could be taken as hostility, especially if one was strong enough to change the flow of the fight. Though Michael was in the open at a distance, he was not worried that the others would find him thanks to Blue and Purple's illusion abilities that perfectly hid him. Secondly was the power of the two below. They were strong, but Michael could tell they were simply average rank 2 powerhouses. They fought like cultivators and not like class-driven awakeners. But he could also be wrong. There were many awakeners whose foundations were very ordinary. Still, to someone like Michael, they were only average. An average could not see through Blue and Purple's illusions. He remained crouched on the ridge, senses calm and steady, eyes following the clash with increasing interest. The fight grew fiercer. The massive pure barbarian roared, stomping the ground and sending a shockwave through the ice. Snow blasted upward. The mixed-born slid backward several meters, boots barely skimming the ground, blade flicking out to deflect the tail end of the impact. Michael felt the force even from his vantage point. But it was nothing concerning. He observed quietly, unmoving, letting Blue and Purple maintain the perfect concealment veil around him. The two undead were not only adept at illusions, they were instinctively attuned to the environment, spreading subtle distortions along the edges of sight and sound that made Michael feel like an empty space within the world, perfect for watching without being noticed. His gaze returned to the mixed-born and the pure barbarian. Should I intervene? Michael wondered. Or keep watching? In the end, Michael felt it was none of his business. In any case, the ancient tribe realm was not an ally of Aurora, so there was no reason to concern himself with whatever grudges or personal battles their people carried. If anything, a death here might not be so bad for the one who lost. Michael's thoughts drifted for a moment. Perhaps it was because of his increasingly deep connection with the dark element. Perhaps it was the common sense he had absorbed from studying necromancy. Or maybe it was simply the result of spending days reading topics like the bucket list of digging through dragon and gods' graves. Whatever the cause, Michael's moral code had started to tilt in a way that would bother the righteous. Now, the idea of two strangers killing each other in hell did not stir him much. He watched for a few seconds longer. The pure barbarian roared again, Bone's sword cleaving down in a brutal diagonal. The mixed-born twisted his body, blade sliding along the larger weapon, redirecting the force just barely enough to avoid having his chest split open. The shock still sent him skidding back, boots carving twin lines through the snow. Blood stained the white ground in faint splatters. Michael exhaled softly. His curiosity was satisfied. Hell really was a crossroads. Michael straightened from his crouch. He gave the battlefield one last glance. He committed both figures to memory. I wonder if we'll meet again, preferably on better ground than this. Time would decide. Michael turned away. Blue and purple adjusted around him, their illusion field flowing with his movement. To the two battling figures below, it was as if nothing had ever been there above them. Only snow, stone, and the weight of their own battle. The frozen plains opened before Michael. He lifted his wrist slightly. The compact watch flickered, arrow. Steady, still pointing in the same direction as before. Back to work, he murmured. With that, he left the distant echoes of the barbarian clash behind, boots crunching into fresh snow as he followed the glowing arrow toward the Federation station. In the land of origin, the other Michael had already landed in the capital and was currently staying in the Duke of Evermoon's mansion. Compared to the cold emptiness of Hell's first floor, this place was the opposite. Warm lantern light, soft carpets, the faint fragrance of herbs and roasted meat drifting in the air. Servants moving with practiced quiet. Tip, you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Novel bin red light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel online for free. You can find hundreds of English translated light novel, web novel, Korean novel, and Chinese novel which are. Chapter 676 Settlement. Compared to the cold emptiness of Hell's first floor, this place was the opposite. Warm lantern light, soft carpets, the faint fragrance of herbs and roasted meat drifting in the air. Across a long carved dining table sat Arian Evermoon, watching him with a small smile as she lifted a forkful of food. If Michael were honest with himself, the contrast was almost comedic. A moment ago, part of him was crouched on a frozen ridge, watching two barbarians from the ancient tribe realm try to murder each other in a blizzard. Here, the other part of him was eating glazed beast meat cooked with rare spices. He took another bite. He paused. He chewed again. Then he nodded slowly. This is better than mine, he admitted in his mind without shame. Much better. The Duke's chefs had a reputation for a reason. Arian's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. You like the food, she observed lightly, chin resting on her palm. I can tell. Michael glanced at her. She wasn't wrong. His expression was probably giving it away. It's good, he said simply. Just good, she teased. He let out a breath and gave up. He was starting to understand this princess a little. It's excellent. Arian's smile brightened, pleased for reasons he didn't quite understand. You'll eat like this often if you stay in the mansion, she continued. Father insisted that you rest properly before anything else. Michael nodded, letting her words settle. Truthfully, he didn't mind the rest. Besides, the food was great. A servant stepped forward and refilled their cups with a pale blue drink. Michael lifted the cup, letting the faintly liquid settle before taking a slow sip. Sweet. Another reminder that this world had its own luxuries. He set the cup down. So, he asked, looking at Arian. What now? Arian dabbed her lips with a silk napkin and gave a small, composed nod as if she had been expecting that question. We will attend a banquet tonight in the royal palace, she said. Everything else, you'll find out there. Michael's brow rose a little. Meaning? Arian leaned back slightly in her chair. Meaning I have already told you everything I know, she replied with a tiny shrug. Father told me that the banquet will determine other things. Michael took another drink from his cup, letting the information settle. Politics, royalty, nobles. It was going to be a long night, but he nodded. All right. Arian smiled again, softer this time. Don't worry. I'll be with you the entire time. They continued their meal, letting the earlier heaviness fade into light. Conversation felt peaceful, warm. Meanwhile, after some time, the Michael in hell had already reached his location. He slowed as the landscape shifted. What stood ahead of him was not what he expected. Michael blinked once, then again. Is this what the Federation calls a settlement? He had imagined something small, a fortified outpost, a bunker, a few tents, maybe a simple stone structure. But what rose before him looked nothing like a temporary camp. Towering walls stretched across the frozen horizon, carved from a mix of reinforced alloy and black stone. The surface glimmered faintly with runic circuits, pulsing in a slow heartbeat rhythm. The gate alone was massive, tall enough for giants to walk through and reinforced, with layers of metal plates. This was not a settlement. This was a small city. Michael's eyes traced the top of the walls. Movement caught his attention. Figures walked along the ramparts. Federation soldiers. Their discipline alone gave it away. Michael also noticed the mounted weapons. Large turrets, mana cannons. This place could flatten a demon horde without breaking a sweat. He let out a slow breath. So this is the Federation's first floor base. It was bigger than he imagined. He started toward the massive gates, crunching through the snow. Few meters in, he saw others as well. He wasn't alone. Around him, spaced out across the frozen plains, were silhouettes, moving toward the same location. Teenagers, young men and women, all roughly his age. Apparently, he wasn't the only one who decided the settlement should be the first stop. Michael adjusted his pace and continued onward, blending with the slow stream of students making their way to the settlement. The closer he got, the larger the gates appeared. By the time Michael and the others reached the entrance, the sheer height of the walls made even the taller students tilt their heads back. And once he stepped through the gate, Michael slowed again, because the inside was not what he expected either. Instead of a strict military outpost like the outside suggested, the interior felt alive, bustling, chaotic. A long central street stretched ahead, flanked by rows of stalls, shops, and open structures. The layout resembled a marketplace more than anything else. Voices rose and overlapped, the sounds of bargaining, echoing between the buildings. Strong awakeners, cultivators, and even a few non-human silhouettes moved among the crowd without shame or restraint. People exchanged items with an almost aggressive enthusiasm. Some were trading demon parts. Some bartered glowing stones. Some held metal fragments clearly from other races. One stall even displayed a row of small sealed bottles, each containing a writhing mass of energy. Michael raised a brow. He moved further in, letting his eyes take in the flow of goods. He passed a vendor selling dark bones etched with symbols. Another was selling jagged blue crystals that hummed faintly with icy energy. Further down, someone shouted prices for talismans made from monster hydron work from a race he didn't recognize. Michael watched as a burly man shoved a bundle of demon fangs toward a hooded woman, demanding double the price. She shoved back. They argued. Neither cared who heard. He continued onward. The soldiers patrolling the roads didn't intervene. They only watched, ensuring nothing escalated beyond shouting. Michael took a slow breath, tasting the faint scent of cold metal, demon blood, and cooked food blending strangely together. For a place inside hell, it was surprisingly lively. Chapter 677 Map. Edited. For a place inside hell, it was surprisingly lively. Michael let his gaze travel higher, past the stalls and crowd. That was when he noticed it. Not all the buildings were temporary wooden structures or metal frames. Some were properly built, and on a few of those plaques and banners hung in clear sight. He saw the stylized flask and leaf emblem of an alchemy organization. Next to it, a sturdier structure bore a crossed blade and hammer symbol, the mark of a weapon association branch. So some supernatural organizations have branches here too, Michael thought. It was not surprising when he considered it. Where there were resources, there was trade. Michael adjusted his cloak slightly and continued forward, mind shifting back to his earlier plan. Information first. Michael scanned it briefly. Map stall. Michael's eyes shifted in that direction. On the eastern side of the main street, tucked between a talisman vendor and a stall grilling demon meat skewers, stood a booth. Comprehensive hell floor maps. Routes, zones, racial territories. Michael stepped towards the stall. Behind the counter sat a middle-aged man. At first glance he looked ordinary, with weathered skin, faint wrinkles at the eyes, and gray streaks in his beard. But the moment Michael stepped close enough, a subtle pressure brushed against his senses. It was familiar, the exact kind of strength the Academy's assistant teachers radiated, the ones who stood at the peak of rank 2. Michael's eyes narrowed faintly. Awakener? Cultivator? He could not tell for sure, and honestly he did not care much. He only needed one thing. "Welcome," the man said without looking up. "What do you need?" Michael placed a hand on the counter. "I would like a comprehensive map of the first 5 floors of hell." The man did not respond. Finally, his eyes lifted. "You are new here." Michael did not react. He had expected this much. No matter how much he wanted to blend in, to someone this experienced, he probably smelled like someone who had just stepped into hell for the first time. He gave a single nod. "Is that going to be a problem?" The man shook his head slowly. "Not really. Just that." "Do you have money?" Michael froze. He let out a slow breath and shook his head. "Trade by barter works here, right?" The vendor gave a short, approving nod. "Barter works," he confirmed. "Most people prefer it. Money loses value fast in hell." Michael relaxed a little. The vendor leaned forward slightly, folding his arms on the counter in a more businesslike manner. "So then," he continued, his tone now professional, "what kind of map do you want? I have 2 types." He reached beneath the counter and placed items down one by one. "Surface maps," he said, tapping a thick rolled parchment tied with black string. "Hand-painted. Good for quick reference." Another item was placed down, this time a small crystalline slab, glowing faintly with embedded runes. "Projection crystals," the man said. "Shows terrain in 3 dimensions. But it is expensive." "So which one do you want?" Michael looked between the parchment map and the glowing projection crystal. The difference in quality was obvious. The parchment was simple and durable. Michael weighed his options for a brief moment. Sometimes it was smarter to save resources, and sometimes it was better to choose the best. "I will take the second one," Michael said, tapping the projection crystal. "The crystal map." As he spoke, he reached into his storage space and pulled out a rank 3 spirit crystal. One of the 9 he had. He placed it gently on the counter. The middle-aged man froze. The lazy neutrality on his face collapsed. His eyes widened, then sharpened, then widened again. His posture straightened without him even realizing it. "That," the man whispered, voice a little dry, "is more than enough." Michael tilted his head slightly. "So it is acceptable?" The man snatched the crystal with surprising speed, as if afraid Michael might suddenly take it back. "Acceptable?" the vendor said with a stiff laugh. "Boy, this is worth several of those crystals. You could have bought half the stall with this." Michael scratched the back of his head. "Ah!" The man no longer looked indifferent. He pushed the projection crystal forward with both hands. "Here, take it," he said. "But I cannot just take a rank 3 spirit crystal for a single map." Before Michael could reply, the man bent down behind the counter. Again. A moment later, he set several small objects on the table with soft clinks, round, glossy, each one pulsing faintly with a contained aura. 10 in total. Michael's brows drew together. The man noticed the look and chuckled. "These are demon cores," he explained, "formed in the bodies of stronger demons, level 2 to 3 and above." Michael's mind translated automatically. Level 2 and 3 meant rank 1 and up. The vendor tapped one of the cores with a knuckle. "These 10 are from level 4 demons," he added. "Rank 2 then." Michael's eyes flickered. From the terms the man used, it became clear. Cultivator, not a class-based awakener. The man pushed the pile of cores closer to him. "These are for you," he said. "Take them. I am not giving you back that spirit crystal, but I am not shameless enough to pretend a map costs that much." Michael glanced at the projection crystal, then at the 10 demon cores. "Useful. Very useful. And remember this," the man said, his tone turning serious. "Demon cores are the main currency here in Hell. Spirit crystals, artifacts, materials. People will take those too, but cores are what everyone accepts without question." He held up one core between two fingers. "Pay attention to them." Michael nodded once. "I will. Even with these cores, it is still not enough for that spirit crystal," the middle-aged man said. "So I will add something else." The man still was not done. He bent down once more, this time bringing up a thin stack of tightly bound pages. The cover was a dull, dark leather worn at the edges. He set it beside the projection crystal. "This is a monster note," the vendor said. "A personal record. Covers the common and uncommon demon species on the first 30 floors, their habits, rough strengths, and general regions where they appear." Michael's attention sharpened. "The crystal map has basic information," the man continued. "Main routes, danger zones, racial territories, and so on. But this," he tapped the notebook, "is more detailed. Subspecies, nesting tendencies, migration habits during hellstorms. Things that are very annoying to learn on your own." Michael was silent for a heartbeat. Inside, though, he was very satisfied. Demon cores he could get himself. He already planned to. But a carefully compiled record of monsters and where to find them, written by someone experienced enough to reach at least the 30th floor and return alive, was something else entirely. "This," the man said, pushing both the crystal and the notebook toward him, "is the least I can do, or I will feel like a thief." Michael reached out and rested his hand briefly on the leather cover, feeling the faint texture beneath his fingers. "Then I will accept it," he said quietly. For a single rank 3 spirit crystal, this trade seemed a bit more fair. It was a small win. Michael gathered the projection crystal, the demon cores, and the monster note into his storage space before giving the man a polite nod. "Thank you so much." Without another word, he turned and began walking away, blending once more into the flow of people moving across the lively marketplace. The vendor remained frozen behind the stall for several seconds, eyes locked on the direction Michael had gone. Only after the youth vanished completely did he release a slow breath. Systemic. He looked down at the rank 3 spirit crystal in his hand again. A crystal, formed by pure systemic condensation, perfectly shaped, pure in energy quality, the kind that only appeared as loot drops in the land of origin. And only awakeners could enter that place. The man narrowed his eyes slightly. That boy. Did he kill the creature that dropped this himself? Rank 3 spirit crystals were not produced by weak creatures. The vendor tapped his finger lightly against his counter, thoughts spinning. Or was it given to him by someone? A mentor, a family head, a sect elder. His brow furrowed. A person who could part with something like this so easily either had more, or was strong enough to get more without worry. The vendor's gaze deepened. And his presence. "Not someone simple," the vendor murmured. He leaned back in his seat, still staring in the direction Michael had disappeared. Whether that youth killed a king-rank creature himself or not, it did not matter. Anyone with the power, resources, or background to casually use a system-generated rank 3 crystal as pocket change was someone he had no intention of offending. The vendor let out a quiet sigh. Also, how can a man be so beautiful, goddammit? Chapter 678 Banquet 1. After getting the map, Michael did not linger. He stepped out of the bustling streets, passed through the wide gates, and soon left the Federation settlement behind. The moment he crossed a certain distance, the noise faded, replaced once more by the quiet, biting cold of Hell's frozen plains. Michael continued walking until the settlement walls were only a distant, dark outline behind him. Only then did he stop. He reached into his storage space and brought out the projection crystal. The moment his mana touched it, faint runes pulsed to life. A 3-layered light panel unfolded upward, rendering a floating map in crisp detail. "First floor," Michael said quietly. The projection shifted instantly. A vast terrain appeared before him in translucent glowing lines. Mountains, plains, frozen lakes, danger zones, demon nests, and racial territories all marked with hovering symbols. Michael studied it carefully. "So the Federation base is here," he murmured, tracing his finger lightly through the air. He dragged his finger outward. More markers appeared as the projection zoomed out. Small clustered icons in different colors and shapes. Michael's eyes narrowed at a few particular ones. "Racial settlements," he muttered. So it was not just the Federation. For the first floor of Hell, there were more settlements than he had expected. But when he thought about it, it made sense. Aurora was a relatively new power in the universe. If even they could afford to plant a foothold in Hell, what of the ancient races that had existed long before them? Of course they would be here, Michael thought. Resources, rare materials, unique environments. Every serious faction would want a share. His gaze moved across the projection again. Though he was interested in the other races, they were not what he came to Hell for. In any case, he could always see them later. Right now, his goals were simple. Everything else could wait. Michael's eyes returned to the demon locations marked on the map. The first floor of Hell was wide. Shockingly wide. So wide that, if he compared it to his home realm, it probably did not lose to half its size. Even with the presence of various races establishing settlements, outposts, and small cities, the land itself was vast enough that demons still had more than enough space to survive and multiply. Of course, the presence of these races came with one benefit. "There are fewer strong demons here," Michael murmured. To complete the Academy's evaluation task, what Michael truly needed lay on the 5th floor. The assignment was only one goal, though. Michael had another that mattered just as much, if not more. Filling his contract slots. And Hell just happened to lack anything but bodies. Michael zoomed the projection out again, eyes sharpening. "Lower-ranked demons of many kinds exist here," he whispered. The map confirmed it. Several regions were marked with striped red circles densely populated but not too dangerous. Perfect. Michael tagged one of the clusters on the map, a region on the northern plains. According to the map, that area held mixed species of level 1 to 2 demons. "I'll check this spot first." He closed the projection crystal, letting the floating image fade into nothingness. Michael started walking and vanished into the frozen plains to begin the hunt. Like this, several hours passed. Far away, in the land of origin, specifically the capital of the Lionheart Kingdom, the sun had already begun to set, dyeing the entire city in shades of amber and crimson. Tonight, Michael and Arian Evermoon were to attend the royal family's banquet. Right now, Michael stood in front of a tall mirror, quietly looking at his reflection. This time, he was not dressed in his usual black robes or travel attire. Instead, he wore a suit. A perfectly tailored black suit with subtle silver embroidery along the cuffs, paired with a crisp white shirt and a dark vest that fit him like it had been sculpted onto his body. His long hair was tied neatly behind his head, giving him a composed, dignified look. Outside his door, he faintly sensed Arian's presence drawing closer, accompanied by the soft chime of jewelry. Michael adjusted the suit collar one last time. Should I start dressing formal? Unable to even deny his beauty this time, the slightly vain Michael couldn't help but ponder on some certain things. A soft knock sounded at the door. Michael already knew who it was. "Princess, you may enter," he said calmly. The door opened with a quiet click. Arian stepped inside, and the first thing she did was freeze. Her eyes widened, her lips parted. Her breath hitched for a fraction of a second as she stared at him in the suit. "Sir Mike," she whispered, almost dazed. "You look incredible." The praise hit him directly in the ego. Inwardly, he was very satisfied. He straightened his posture just a little, nothing too obvious, but enough that the fabric of the suit settled more perfectly against his frame. "Thank you," Michael said, allowing a small, controlled smile to form. "But you—" His gaze swept over her. Her hair was braided with silver threads, cascading like a waterfall over her shoulder. A slim, elegant dress hugged her figure, shimmering faintly when she moved, and a soft, warm fragrance wrapped around her like a quiet halo. Michael used a line he remembered from a movie in his old life. "You look like you stepped out of a painting," he said softly. Arian blinked, caught off guard by the straightforward compliment. Color rose to her cheeks as she smoothed her dress instinctively. "You look really, really good," she muttered again, almost under her breath as if trying to regain her composure. Michael nodded, appreciating her appearance without hiding it. "You did well," he said. "Your outfit suits you perfectly." Arian's eyes brightened just a bit too visibly, but she tried to hide it behind a composed smile. "Shall we go?" she asked. Michael offered his arm. "We should." Arian placed her hand lightly on his arm, and together they stepped toward the door. Chapter 679 Banquet 2. A short while later, a carriage rolled to a smooth stop before the Grand Palace Hall. Lanterns shaped like floating stars drifted in the air, illuminating the marble steps leading to the entrance. Michael stepped out first, offering his hand to Arian. She accepted with practiced grace, and together they walked toward the towering golden doors as attendants bowed deeply. The moment the doors opened, a wave of warm light, soft music, and refined perfume washed over them. Yet the instant Michael stepped inside, his expression barely shifted, but internally, he felt suffocated. Everything looked elegant. The chandeliers, the polished floors, the expensive gowns, the noble families gathered in circles of influence. But beneath the beauty he sensed it, superficiality, layers and layers of it. He watched nobles greet each other with wide smiles that never touched their eyes, laughter that sounded rehearsed, compliments that were empty air, conversations filled only with posturing and politics. It all felt so fake that even the polite smiles looked distorted. Michael slowed slightly, unable to hide the faint crease in his brows. Arian noticed. "Is something wrong?" she whispered. Michael shook his head lightly. "Nothing. Just taking in the atmosphere." He kept his voice calm, but inwardly he was already growing tired of the charade around him. Compared to the raw, brutal honesty of hell, even with demons trying to tear each other apart, this hall felt far more suffocating. At least demons did not pretend. A passing noblewoman gave Arian a practiced smile before turning to Michael with a far too interested gaze. Michael returned a polite nod. Arian leaned closer, whispering, "Welcome to the royal capital's high society." Michael exhaled quietly. Unfortunately, together, they stepped deeper into the banquet hall, all eyes slowly turning their way. As they walked, Arian's eyes flicked around the hall, recognizing faces Michael did not. After a moment, she leaned slightly toward him. "Sir Mike," she said softly, "I need to go greet a few people. Some are my father's old friends, and it would be rude not to say hello." Michael nodded. "Do what you need to." Arian smiled, relieved he understood. "I won't take long," she promised. Then, with a subtle tug on his arm, she guided him toward a quieter corner of the hall. There, an elegant refreshment table stretched out, crystal glasses neatly arranged beside trays of sparkling drinks, silver plates stacked next to dishes of roasted meats, fruits, and delicacies only nobles could afford. "You can stay here for a bit," Arian said, gesturing gently to the table. "Serve yourself whatever you like. No one will bother you here." Michael glanced at the setup. Food, drinks, a bit of peace. "Not bad. I'll be back soon," Arian said. "Don't disappear." "I'll stay here." Arian nodded once more and then drifted away gracefully, her presence quickly swallowed by the shifting clusters of nobles. Left alone, Michael reached for a plate and added a mix of food inside, and without bothering about his surroundings, started to enjoy the food. As Michael quietly enjoyed the moment of silence he'd been gifted, Savoring the rare peace of a hall filled with noise, a soft voice drifted. From his left, "Sir Mike." His hand paused mid-reach. That voice was familiar. He turned his head, scanning the space beside him, and his eyes widened ever so slightly. Standing only a few steps away, looking just as surprised as he felt, was a face he had not seen in a very long time. The first noble lady he had ever met in the land of origin. Syria Golden, the youngest daughter of the Golden family, the family whose residence he had stayed in for a short while when waiting to meet Mage Lien. Her hair was styled in soft curls tonight, her dress a pale cream embroidered with delicate gold threads that caught the light beautifully. She looked older in a subtle way, not in age, but in poise. More refined, more composed than the bright, curious girl he remembered. Yet her eyes, those still held the same spark. "Sir Mike." "It really is you," Syria said, a slow smile forming on her lips. Michael blinked once, the memory of the Golden estate flickering through his mind. "Lady Syria," he said calmly. "It has been a while." Her smile widened, a mix of surprise and genuine warmth. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said softly. Then her gaze swept over him again, slower this time. "And you look very different from before. The suit suits you incredibly well." Michael gave a polite nod. "Thank you. You look fine yourself." Syria raised an eyebrow, lips tugging upward. "It's good to see you again," Michael said simply. "I didn't know I'd meet you here." Her eyes sharpened instantly. "Oh," she said, a spark of mock offense lighting up her face. "Why? Did you think someone like me doesn't belong in a place like this?" Michael paused. Then, slowly, he gave her a look that was half exasperated, half amused. "I never said that. But you thought it." Syria shot back, chin lifting in the same spirited way he remembered from their first meeting. "You hesitated before answering." "That's because you're putting words in my mouth," Michael replied calmly. Syria clicked her tongue softly, but her expression brightened again almost immediately. She lifted her chin with exaggerated elegance, placing a hand on her hip in a way that was clearly meant to look dignified but ended up looking more like a puffed-up cat trying to act regal. "Well," she declared, "I might not be as popular as some of the noble ladies here tonight, but I do have a standing." Michael stared at her for a heartbeat. Syria held the pose, head lifted proudly, chest forward, trying so hard to look imposing that even the golden embroidery on her dress seemed to stand straighter with her. It was, despite her best efforts, unmistakably adorable. A quiet laugh escaped Michael before he could stop it. Syria's eyes widened. What is that look? Why are you smiling like that?" Chapter 680 Banquet 3. Michael shook his head slowly. "It is nothing," he said, the smile lingering. "You are mean, Sir Mike." Michael did not argue. Instead, he gently set the plate down, lifted his gaze to hers, and spoke in his usual calm tone. "Would you like to join me for a drink, Lady Syria?" "I would be honored to," Syria said, her voice dropping into a formal, elegant tone. "It would be improper of me to refuse." Michael nodded and gestured toward a standing server to bring some drinks. The server approached with practiced elegance, bowing slightly as he presented 2 crystal glasses filled with a light golden wine. Michael accepted one glass and passed the other to Syria, who took it with both hands. "Thank you," she said, giving the server a polite nod before he stepped away. Michael lifted his glass lightly. Syria mirrored him, her eyes bright. "So," she began. "So," Michael said at the same time. Both paused. Syria laughed softly. "You go first." Michael inclined his head. "I was only going to ask how you have been since we last met." Syria's smile softened at the sincerity in his tone. "Much better than before. And I wanted to tell you." She stopped mid-sentence. Michael blinked. Syria's gaze was no longer on him. It was locked past his shoulder. Before Michael could turn, he already sensed it. That familiar presence. Ariane. Michael slowly shifted his head to the side. Ariane Evermoon stood there, Her hair glimmered under the hall's warm lights. Her eyes, however, were fixed firmly on Syria Golden. Syria seemed to realize how this looked. She straightened quickly, lowering her glass and offering a polite little bow. "Princess Evermoon," she said, her voice suddenly formal. "Good evening." Ariane returned the gesture with perfect noble grace, though her expression held a subtle firmness. "Lady Syria," she said gently. "Good evening to you as well." Then Ariane's gaze shifted to Michael. "Sir Mike." Her tone was soft, yet the little smile she wore did not hide the hint of sharpness in her eyes. "I hope you were not too bored while I was gone." Michael shook his head lightly. "Not at all." Ariane's eyes dropped briefly to the 2 glasses of wine, then to Syria, then back to Michael. "I see you found company." Syria flinched just a little and opened her mouth quickly. "Oh no, Princess, it was not that. I mean, Sir Mike only invited me for a drink because we had not seen each other in a long time. Nothing improper." Michael raised an eyebrow at her sudden panic. Ariane's lips curved. "I did not say anything was improper," she replied calmly. Syria froze. Michael noticed the tension beginning to wrap around the 3 of them like an invisible rope. He took a small sip of his wine, then looked at Ariane with a calm expression. "I was catching up with Lady Syria," he said simply. "You came at the right time." Ariane's shoulders relaxed slightly. Syria let out a breath she clearly did not know she had been holding. Michael continued, "Shall I get you a glass as well?" Ariane glanced at the wine between his fingers, then at Syria holding hers. Her smile softened a little. "I would like that," she said. Michael gestured to the server again. As the server hurried over, Syria shifted awkwardly, then cleared her throat quietly. "Princess, Sir Mike, should I give you 2 some space?" she asked. Ariane turned to her with surprising poise. "That will not be necessary," she replied. "We are simply enjoying a drink." Syria nodded, though the way she held her glass just a bit too tightly made it clear she was not sure if that was a good thing or not. Michael, meanwhile, looked between the 2 women, one embarrassed and flustered, the other composed but sharp. And he wondered, why does this suddenly feel more dangerous than hell? Fortunately, the food here tasted great. Ariane accepted the new glass the server handed her. Syria lifted hers a little higher in silent acknowledgement. Michael simply sipped his, utterly calm. Then, nothing. No one spoke. Not a word. They simply stood there. Ariane silently observed the hall, her eyes occasionally drifting toward Syria. Syria pretended to be fascinated by the chandelier for a full 10 seconds. Michael felt peaceful. Another 10 seconds passed. Then 15. Then 20. Syria's expression slowly twisted into something between panic and pleading, as if silently screaming, "Say something, anyone, please." Ariane was no better. Her fingers tightened on the stem of her glass, her composed smile wobbling just a little. Michael watched people walk by, the flicker of lantern light reflecting off polished marble, and thought, much better. So quiet. Syria wanted to sink into the floor. I really should not have listened to them. She kept her eyes fixed on the chandelier, pretending to appreciate the way the crystals caught the light, but her thoughts were nowhere near the ceiling. If there was one person who had spoken to Mike Nor on genuinely friendly terms before he became famous in the kingdom, it was Syria, not the social climbers who had only learned his name after the tournament. Mage Lien did not count. The relationship between him and Michael was purely made of purpose and benefit, mutual interest, transactions. But she had simply talked to him and ended up enjoying an interesting conversation like old friends, even if it was their first time seeing each other. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. And now look at me, standing here like a complete fool between him and the princess. It had started a few days after the news about the legendary ruin spread. Rumors of what had happened, and of Sir Mike, who seemed to have been thrown into the mix. How even the royal family seemed to value him. Her father had called her into his study. Her eldest brother had been there too. They had spoken gently, but the intent beneath every word was clear. Syria, you were acquainted with Sir Mike before the rest of the kingdom noticed him. This is a rare opportunity. His future looks very bright. It would be foolish not to at least try to deepen that connection. Chapter 681 Banquet 4. Syria had not been against it. This was the fate of noble ladies. Marriage was their path to power. It had always been like that. They were bridges between houses, living contracts wrapped in silk and etiquette. Very few had the luxury of marrying purely for love. If they had the chance to aim higher, if the family had a chance to secure a stronger ally, most noble girls would accept it. Syria was not naive, so she had only raised one problem. But is he not already the princess's fiancé? He was the one who won Duke Evermoon's competition, and one of the prizes was the Duke's daughter. If he is already bound to her, then it would be improper for me to even try, would it not? Besides, we have only had a single conversation, and that was months ago. Her father had scoffed. For someone as strong as Mike Knorr, a contest prize is not enough to tie him forever, he had said. If he were a minor knight or a poor baron, that would be different. But men like him choose their own path. Even dukes and kings need to bargain carefully. As for one conversation, it was at least something, so you can still use it to your advantage. Her brother had leaned on the desk, thoughtful. Besides, he added, according to our sources, the princess and him do not seem like they share a romantic relationship. Close, yes, but not in that way. They act more like political allies for now. Her father had nodded, which means that until a decree is announced, everything is still in the air. As long as you do not act shameless or disrespectful, there is no harm in strengthening your bond with him. You met him early. Use that timing. That alone is an advantage other noble ladies do not have. At the time, it made sense. So she came tonight thinking, I will just talk to him like before. If something grows from it, it grows. If not, then I will at least know I tried. Now, standing here, feeling the princess's quiet gaze occasionally brush against her, she finally realized something. Her father's information had missed a very important detail. It was not that there was no romantic feeling. It was that whatever existed between Mike Knorr and Princess Ariane was simply not obvious enough for outsiders to read. From up close, it was different. Syria could see it now. The way the princess relaxed too quickly when he spoke. The way Mike Knorr's tone shifted without him noticing when he addressed her. The way they seemed to understand each other's rhythm, even in silence. Syria lowered her eyes slightly, her lashes trembling. So much for no romantic relationship. Her father's confident words echoed uselessly in her mind. Everything is still in the air. Is it really? She thought bitterly. She took another small sip of wine to cover the way her throat felt. Tight. She was not angry at her family. This was how nobles thought. This was how they survived. She was only annoyed at herself. Annoyed that she had agreed too easily. Annoyed that she had walked straight into a situation that made her look like she was trying to steal another woman's man, even if nothing had happened yet. Most of all, she was annoyed at the timing. Of all the moments for her to return, she risked a glance at Ariane. The princess still wore that polite, composed expression. There was no open hostility, no obvious displeasure. But Syria was a noble lady too. She could read the tiny stiffness in Ariane's shoulder, the subtle guardedness in her eyes whenever Syria looked Michael's way. Syria inhaled slowly, forcing herself to calm down. Fine. It is not like I came here to rip them apart. If things are already leaning this way, then I will not embarrass myself by clinging too hard. She straightened a little and let her gaze settle on the hall again. If she could not retreat without looking strange, she could at least behave properly. At the very least, she decided one thing firmly. I will not act like those ridiculous noble girls who throw themselves at any rising star. Whatever bond one had with him before, I will treat it as a simple friendship now. If fate allows more, it will happen naturally. If not, then so be it. Her grip on the glass loosened. Somewhere beside her, Michael took another unbothered sip of wine, still enjoying his peaceful corner that had somehow turned into a battlefield only in the minds of the two girls beside him. Syria exhaled slowly, lips pressing together in determination. Yes, friendship, calm, dignified. I will not be like those desperate girls who throw themselves at any handsome face just because he shines a little brighter than most. A beat passed. Her eyes drifted sideways, just a little, and immediately her resolve wavered. Because heavens above, why is he even more handsome than before? Her mind went blank for a full second. Did he always look like this? Did she forget? The suit fit him far too perfectly. His hair was tied back neatly, making his sharp features stand out. Even more, the calm, unbothered expression on his face did not help either. She swallowed. This is unfair. Completely unfair. How is a man allowed to look like this? Syria's vanity stirred shamelessly. Michael was easily the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Heavens, 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 he really is the most handsome man I have ever seen in my life. Is the princess charmed by him too? A thought popped up in her head. If he was not standing beside the princess, would I dare try harder? Her cheeks warmed in embarrassment. Stop. Absolutely not. Shameful thought. Ridiculous thought. Delete immediately. But the thought did not delete itself. It sat there. Unfortunately for Syria, even though she was actually the same age as Michael, her demeanor, her appearance and her petite stature made Michael see her completely as his cousin's age mate.